In discussions with market towns and villages about how the council can help post-COVID recovery, the key priority that emerged was that we help improve the street scene by replacing and repairing litter bins and increasing street cleaning. We will allocate £185,000 to this, which will include some additional funding to tackle fly tipping. And finally, of that £1.3 million, there will be an additional one-off £100,000 to support the transition to flexible, agile working within the council. In addition to this one-off funding, this budget includes additional base budget funding of £200,000 a year from 2023 for revenue funding of climate emergency work, and additional staff funding of £175,000 in the legal, economy and comms teams, split between those, not for each of them. Our medium-term financial strategy projections, which include the likelihood of government spending cuts next year, show a small deficit of £284,000 for 23-24, rising to £1.14 million in 24-25, £2.4 million in 25-26, and £2.47 million in 26-27, a total of £6.3 million over 5 years, a significant improvement on the £19.3 million bequeathed us by the previous administration. However, we recognise that reductions in core government funding will ultimately leave us with a structural deficit. Therefore, we propose to undertake a detailed strategic spending review this year in order to identify £2 million worth of core savings. This will involve analysis of opportunities for increased income, efficiencies and service priorities, and we intend to bring forward proposals by next autumn. With the inevitable reduction in government funding, with inflation projected to rise to over 7% in the coming months, it is necessary to increase council tax. We propose a Band D increase of £3.95, which is lower than the vast majority of our neighbouring councils, and also enables an increase in the Winchester Town precept of £3.30. Council, I'd like to thank the finance team for all their hard work and all the council officers for their contribution in keeping spending under control during these challenging times. This effort, along with the firm decisions taken by this administration, has left the council in a more resilient financial position than many local authorities and enables us to present a budget where both fees and council tax increases are significantly below inflation, and enables us to deliver our council plan priorities, particularly carbon reduction and improving the quality of the public realm, while at the same time improving delivery of our core essential services and ensuring we provide help to the most vulnerable in our district. This paper has had, similarly to the HRA paper, extensive scrutiny, I think several hours in the scrutiny committee. So I hope that the outbreak of unanimity that we experienced in the last paper will continue to prevail through this meeting, and I commend the recommendations for your approval.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Do I have a seconder?
I would like to second Mr. Deputy Mayor and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Do I have any questions, please? Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just a quick question. Do you know for sure that there will be a reduction in government funding moving forward, or are you just surmising that?
Government have been indicating for the last 3 years that they will be resetting business rates to the base level, which would be a £2.5 million cut. And they've signalled that new homes bonus will be ending. It has made planning really difficult. That has been the intention of government every year, and then when the spending review comes along, at the last minute, it's been rolled over. But given the levelling up agenda and the broader move towards government money moving north, I think it's highly likely that the projections that we have here are the minimum. The likelihood of a significant reduction next year. Again, the indications are that there will be some transition funding because of such a significant cut. But again, we can't be sure of that. It makes budgeting really difficult. And we hope that we get the 3-year spending commitment so that we know where we are.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I am delighted to see that £100,000 has been allocated to the Hardship Fund, because it's always been very well supported since Councillor Godfrey initially set it up. I was just curious as to why there was a decision, though, to put more into a trial of the food waste project when we could learn an awful lot of lessons from across the border. And so that got more money than the Hardship Fund, which we've already discussed this evening, is really, really important given the increase in costs that many of our residents will face. Thank you.
The council tax hardship scheme is a top-up over and above the council tax reduction scheme that was introduced some years ago by Councillor Godfrey. We introduced that top-up last year and funded the top-up, and all the indications from our revenue and benefits team is that that is the sum that that is sufficient for that scheme this year, because, as I say, it's a top-up, it's not the whole amount. So therefore, you know, the other priorities can be funded. I mean, £100,000 is perfectly sufficient for the council tax hardship scheme as things stand.
Thank you. Councillor Gemmell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, with the amount of complaints coming forward with reference to planning and enforcement, the lack of communication and the disregard of liaison between this council and the parishes, I'm surprised more money has not been put forward into that department. Can you help us with that?
We had already earlier this year allocated more funds into both enforcement and the legal team. There's an additional 175,000 that I mentioned for staffing costs. The most significant part of that 100,000 will again be to the legal team. Much of the delay with enforcement is around legal. I also raised the issue of the two major problem enforcement cases that we know will cost more, and we will need to outsource some of the work on that. And that was I made mention in my presentation. By being able to replenish the major investment reserve, we will be able to fund that, and it is a priority for us to get that moving. So that will take the pressure off the enforcement team if we can outsource those two major enforcement cases, one of which I'm sure you'll be very closely aware of.
Councillor Pearson, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll depend upon you to make sure I keep it succinct. Yes, thank you. I'm reminded when I look at this budget that the phrase climate emergency, which I support very much, as you all know. I've said this time and time again. I welcomed it when you first came up with it. Indeed, it's a Conservative policy as well. Not uniquely Conservative, not uniquely Liberal, but generally it was welcome. I looked at emergency and it's a take action now. I looked at the budget and I raised a query, well, especially when I looked at an emerging document, which is coming up next week rather than today, about carbon saving. How much of your budget depends on carbon offsetting? And recently I learned that some carbon offsetting money was going to Kenya to encourage the growth of cash crops rather than food crops. Is this what we're talking about?
As far as I'm aware, there is no provision for carbon offsetting in the budget. We're talking about the revenue budget rather than capital expenditure. Carbon offsetting would be part of the capital funding. I think fine.
I'm sorry, Councillor Cutler, I can't hear you. Deaf awareness, I think, is the phrase. I'm deaf in one ear, have a hearing aid in the other. So can you assist me, please?
Councillor Pearson, if you turn your microphone off, it will come out louder.
It'll make mine louder. Yeah. No, so as far as I'm aware, Councillor Pearson, that there's no provision for carbon offsetting within the revenue budget. But Councillor Williams will probably be more able when the paper comes to you to answer the question in more detail.
Thank you very much. Councillor Horrell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. May I ask Councillor Cutler why he thought it necessary to run a test for £250,000 to assess electric vehicles when a neighbouring authority, Salisbury, just a few miles away, has several in full operational use? Why can't we just pop over to Salisbury, look and learn? I'm sure a neighbouring authority would be delighted to share their knowledge and save us significant tens of thousands of pounds in an unnecessary test. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think Councillor Horrell once again oversimplifies. She often talks about projects and the importance to develop huge major projects, but not recognising the costs of the early stages of implementation. And certainly with both electric buses and with freighters, there are huge infrastructure implications. The requirement to understand the detail of electric charging that will be required, the infrastructure that will be required, how a process will work, whether the freighters can work in rural areas. The need to trial that in our specific circumstances is vital for us to be able to implement things properly. We'd very quickly be criticised if we had a failed implementation of these processes. So I'm assured by the environmental services team that there would be there is a considerable amount of work required before implementation, and that this sum will be necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, please.
Thank you, Deputy Chair, Deputy Mayor, should I say. The question I'd like to ask is that with this 1.3 million windfall that we have, we're looking to spend, according to the papers, £450,000 on essential maintenance to the monuments and historic assets, which we say is essential. And then we look a couple of lines down and we're only looking to spend £40,000 on bike storage and other measures to support the promotion of cycling and walking. I just wonder where those figures are coming from, to be honest with you. Could you please enlighten us? Thank you.
The maintenance of historic monuments, of which we have many, is exceedingly expensive. It's very specialist work, and it is a responsibility of this council to maintain those monuments we have. We recognise that over £1 million is required on our key monuments: the Butter Cross, St Maurice's Tower, King Alfred's statue, and Hyde Gate. So we felt it important that while we're in this position, because as I pointed out, our finances deteriorate over time, that this would be an opportunity, particularly in a year coming out of a very difficult period and a jubilee year, to spruce the place up and get things moving on those monuments. We felt was a high priority, but it is expensive. We will have to spend it at some point.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. And can I just ask the portfolio holder of the 400,000 that you're going to spend on electric bus trials and food waste trials, what percentage of those fees will be spent on consultants?
Councillor Warwick will understand that, as I pointed out, in early December we were given these figures. The government spending review, budgeting is very, very difficult around that period. We have taken a broad view on what some of these costs will be, how we'll approach it. We will need to work up that scheme. So I can't tell you how much will be outsourced and how much will be done in-house.
All right, thank you. I've got nobody else on my list, so we're going to debate, please. Oh. Councillor Evans, please. Don't think we're going to get any there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This continues to be a difficult year. We're still facing uncertain futures, and what will the long-term impact of COVID or Omicron be? And those presumably will require some sort of funding. We've been forced to review services. As Councillor Cutler has pointed out, we're 14% down in income, business rates are down, and savings are needed. There's an increase in rural and urban poverty, and we constantly hear that fuel costs are going up, slightly aggravated by the Ukraine situation, and energy costs are rising. And we've already heard from Councillor Lowney that we have a very efficient programme of dealing with homelessness. The proposal to top up the the council hardship fund, I support, to help struggling households, but there are many local and national and global problems, and I do support the it is my understanding that we do support climate emergency work and preparing for a food waste. We have to move on. We have to address these problems. The proposals are for a council tax, unavoidable, regrettably, but this is well below inflation and also well below other local authorities. This is a positive budget, spending on essential services and improving neighbourhood and the district. There's no such thing as a perfect world, and so no doubt this budget will not please everybody. But I think Councillor Cutler, who's the Cabinet Member for, just looking at his title for Finance, should be proud of this budget and deserves congratulations in the current difficulties to present a budget, a balanced budget, and with all the sort of local support, but also trying to look forward to the future. So I am proud to support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Gordon-Smith, please.
Thank you. I particularly welcome the fact that in the major reserve fund, there's going to be a hefty allowance to cover the legal costs which we're likely to face in sorting out the 3 or 4 large planning issues we have, such as Carousel Park. These places have been a running sore for many years. Appreciate it's going to be a lot of money to sort it out, but ultimately by spending this money they'll be saving money in the long run and also reducing the stress on local residents. And I very much welcome this approach and I will support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Firstly, as Cabinet Member for Communities and Wellbeing, I'm obviously delighted that a contribution of £200,000 to the Community Grants Reserve to reduce the impact of planned grant reduction has been included in this budget. Yes, we all have to pay taxes, but 2.7 council tax rise is well below the inflation rate of 5.4, which is currently. Also, 100,000 additional one-off provision to the council's Hardship Fund, which is so very much welcomed in these difficult times. 185,000 towards street cleansing, not just in Winchester, but to help and improve the environment in market towns and across the district. Trials for low carbon lorries and buses. This is another important step towards this council's commitment to reduce carbon emissions from transport to help tackle climate change. The £25,000 to support work to embed the principles of the council's City of Sanctuary commitments. We voted here unanimously at the last full council to support this with collective aim of working towards greater inclusion and equality for refugees and raising public awareness of the importance of sanctuary. This to me is a positive budget. We are spending on essential services, supporting the climate and emergency throughout the district. Councillor Cutler, I congratulate you and the officers for bringing forward this excellent budget in difficult times, and I fully support it. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you. Councillor Tipper Cooper, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would also like to strongly commend this budget and Councillor Cutler for his hard work on it. It is a budget that has a beating heart of progressive Liberal values, and that is fantastic. It is underpinned by spending that supports the most vulnerable, strengthens the community, and prioritises the climate emergency. In terms of supporting the most vulnerable, the £100,000 to the Council's Hardship Fund bolsters support that already exists of the Council tax relief budget, while the £200,000 injection into the grants budget is fantastic news. And I commend the Health and Environment Policy Committee and indeed Councillor Clear for their calls for that budget to be protected as much as possible. And it is really fantastic now that it's not only protected but boosted by Councillor Cutler's budget. Never is it more critical than now to have more money in the right places designed to tackle the cost of living crisis, and I'm sure we can all agree on that. I'm of course absolutely delighted to see the £25,000 invested to embed the principles of the Council's City of Sanctuary commitments, and it's superb. There's already real action planned here, so I'm extraordinarily grateful for that. The climate emergency measures we've already talked about, and indeed the low carbon transport investment of £250,000. I mean, it would be total lunacy to try and invest much greater sums of money in the sort of things that those schemes are looking at without the trials and testing this sort of money will be spent on. And in terms of what people really, really want as well, we probably all hear week in, week out about concerns about cleaner streets and fly tipping. And it's fantastic that money's been invested to tackle that. In terms of the £450,000 for the restoration works of our heritage assets, making up £1 million over 5 years. Particularly delighted to see Highgate identified, a really big issue in our area and a really big gem of our heritage. Winchester's heritage is one of the finest parts of our city, and I would just say that we cannot underestimate the importance it has in terms of bringing additional investment and money into the city. So it may seem like a lot of money, but it generates some as well, and it really makes our city unique. So we should really commend that investment. Councillor Cutler has also shown how well managed the budget is now, and despite huge unprecedented challenges to the council, we find ourselves with a budget surplus and we can deliver great things like this boost to the grants budget. So it's a budget of a beating progressive Liberal heart. It demonstrates the sorts of district that we are and want to be in the future, one that tackles the big challenges of our time in terms of the cost of living crisis and the climate emergency, but also with the heritage funds shows that we are a district that shows deep respect for our past as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I believe that this budget is well balanced, well thought through, and looks to help those who need it the most, while continuing to make Winchester a better place. The importance of the climate emergency cannot be underestimated, yet when we put forward policies to reduce carbon emissions, such as encouraging drivers not to park in the city centre, we are told the economy is more important. But then in the next breath, we are told we need to consider the climate emergency. In my mind, this budget allows us to do both very effectively. But I would, however, like to set straight the record on the issue of carbon offsetting and the accusation that we are going to invest in Kenya and cash crops, as this is untrue. As a council, we are looking at carbon offsetting and best practice, and the report that will be coming to HEP looks at the various issues. And it will also state that we rejected a scheme that looked at tree planting programmes, which was budgeting to reduce deforestation in both Brazil and Amazon as a way of contributing to those projects and reducing emissions and preventing forest burnings. Despite this being a very good project, it was considered that the local residents and taxpayers would potentially object to their council investing money in a scheme that was offsetting so far abroad and had no social or economic return to the region. But back to the budget. This budget is forward thinking. It allows us to meet the criteria of our council plan and set out our future for the district. It meets the climate emergency goals with the 250,000 for low carbon transport and a trial for the low carbon bins. It shows that we are tackling one of the key contributors to carbon and that is under our control, as so many are not. Since taking power, we have cut carbon emissions and we are continuing to do so. This money and this project will help us to meet our ambitious target of net zero by 2024. Equally, the implementation of the food trial shows our commitment to continue improving recycling in our district. It was woefully lacking when we took power and had been falling. The increased provision of 100,000 for the council's hardship fund is giving vital money to those who are facing a huge cost of living crisis. As a council, we are not just focusing on our city, we are making sure that areas of the district are taken care of, with 185,000 to clean and maintain our market towns, whilst allowing vital economies to flourish and to support our goals of 20-minute communities, which again feed back into our ambitious climate targets. As we know, these communities are the lifeblood for those who live in them. COVID has showed us how vital they are, and I am glad that we are putting our money where our mouths are and focusing on what matters to our market towns. I was so proud at the last council meeting as we as a council came together to support the City of Sanctuary and Emotion. And what I am also pleased is that we are now working to make this a reality, not just words. I'm also glad that we are able to offer the extra 200,000 for community grants at a time when, as I've mentioned, as many others have, the cost of living is rising and our residents are struggling. For us as a council, being able to help our community groups and to provide vital services is key, and it is something I'm glad we are able to do. Due to careful budgeting in a time when we have turned our finances that were inherited from the previous administration and when the storm of COVID was upon us, we're still being able to come out with an ability to support and to do more. I can speak for myself and I'm sure other members of the Cabinet when I say that they have reduced funding. It's something we did not want to do, but being fiscally responsible is key to good governance. So now, due to prudent planning, we are able to make more community grants, and this is a positive and exciting opportunity. This is a budget that I am very proud of, for it stands for our values as a council, about caring for our communities, protecting our environment, and making our city, market towns and villages vibrant economies to be envied. I could talk about every point in this budget because I am proud of it, as it clearly shows what a fiscally responsible authority can do in a time of great uncertainty and how good leadership results in good things for our residents. Therefore, I will be wholeheartedly supporting this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Godfrey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking Mr. Botham, Ms. Keys and Mr. Kennedy for the work they put into preparing this budget and for the assistance they've given myself and my leader on the preparation for the understanding of this budget. And I think it's excellent news that we have another balanced budget being proposed. There are some elements of this budget proposal that I welcome. Setting aside monies for the complex enforcement cases is important to our residents, particularly those in rural areas most affected by the problems. Backing this up with an additional legal post to deal with enforcement action will help deal with these and other important matters. The small but important contribution to establishing Winchester as a city of sanctuary, as the Council agreed at the last council, is good news, as is the funding of a Hardship Fund that we've run in one form or another for many years. I also welcome a generally cautious approach to our future finances, although there does seem to be a real danger of the Council vacillating, not properly planning for a future. On both occasions that I have addressed the Cabinet on the current financial strategy, I have acknowledged that there were many areas of uncertainty that impacted on the budget for future years. These uncertainties remain, particularly in the replacement of the government's new homes bonus scheme, decisions about the retention of locally collected business rates, and the future of a county deal. Two significant events have occurred in recent weeks that greatly benefit the Council's finances. The government has extended the current new homes bonus scheme, resulting in an additional grant from government of £1.3 million, and the forecast of an unexpected surplus on the current year's budget of a similar amount. Given the uncertainty of the Council's future budgets, which we've heard so much about tonight, it is right to secure the windfall budget surplus in the reserves for use on a rainy day. What I cannot understand, and I cannot agree with, is the proposal to use rather than save the government's grant of £1.3 million extra in new homes bonus. This money is clearly burning a hole in the pockets of the administration. So rather than looking after the government's funding carefully, the administration proposed to spray this huge amount of money around on a series of unplanned expenditure that I would hesitate to call projects. There is little in the budget that indicates that this administration is taking a grip on the many challenges that are important to the residents of Winchester. Nothing is changed, nothing is forecast, nothing is planned. This budget is tinkering at the edges, holding out until government makes another handout or someone comes up with a good idea on how to make the budget spread further. While decision postponement is an excellent principle of engineering, it is rarely a good idea in public administration. Long term, the City Council needs to generate more money, and the only solution that the administration is putting forward is to raise taxes, raise charges, and charge for services that were previously free. The Council needs to look after taxpayers' money more carefully. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I wish to move an amendment to the motion.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
We have a paper copy.
If Mr. Blakemore has paper copies for distribution.
Members, in order for the council to consider the amendment, I now propose an adjournment of 30 minutes. The section 151 officer is available for advice if required.
We start again at 10:10.
Yeah. And we will start again at 10:10, please. Councillor Godfrey, would you like to present your amendment, please? Could you turn your microphone on first, please?
Thank you. His was years, isn't he? Yeah, no aspiration. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This amendment does not seek to solve all the shortcomings that we see in the proposed budget for next year. The two groups start from very different positions. We would be starting now to reduce expenditure and increase income, rather than wait for a year for the results of the strategic budget review. This amendment seeks to address a few important issues to improve the budget. Last year, this administration reduced the establishment of the planning department by 3 senior posts. This reduced capacity has had a significant detrimental impact on residents across the district, who need a top-performing planning department to be fully resourced. With the emerging local plan, the pressure on the planners will only grow. So this council must back them with more staff. In addition, the council needs to redouble its enforcement efforts, not just planning enforcement, but also environmental. There are too many fly-tipping events that are not investigated. Too many trees are damaged or removed without control. There are too many polluting incidents that need to be halted. Residents want action now on protection of Winchester and its environment. We must also take action to support businesses. We need the local plan to commit to town centre first. We would like to remove parking charges in market towns and in city centres car parks after 4 p.m, like many of our neighbours, to make Winchester a more attractive place to visit. This will take more investigation before we can introduce such measures. So for now, we want to make parking free after 6 p.m. and on Sundays. We also want to be more cautious with the government's funding that has been given to us. The windfall of an extra £1.3 million from an extension of a new homes bonus must not be frittered away as soon as it arrives, particularly when everyone agrees that future finances are so uncertain. We propose that the majority of this money is placed in reserves, where decisions about when best to use it can be made when there is more certainty of other funding sources. Some of the proposals made by the administration for this windfall are important. So important as to need funding on a recurring basis, not just when the money happens to become available. We must fund the support for the City of Sanctuary and the maintenance of historic assets on an annual and planned basis, not just when we have a bit to spare. There's already over £4 million for these items in our reserves. We must maintain the Hardship Fund, which has been made so much difference over many years to the way the council can support the most vulnerable. This must be a recurring commitment, as must routine cleansing and maintenance of our town centres. But these so-called trials, both in pursuit of worthwhile outcomes, but with no plans and little prospect of delivering any improvement to the climate anytime soon. Why would you run a trial for collecting food waste when the government is about to specify how these schemes must work? Similarly, using £250,000 to fund a trial of zero carbon buses and freight vehicles, what's the trial meant to prove? Zero carbon buses already work effectively in many places. We just need to wait until our current bus contract allows for such a change, when we may need the spare cash to pay for it. We also know that zero carbon waste freighters work fine in urban areas and do not yet work effectively in rural areas. It's not even a trial, but a contribution towards the infrastructure needed to charge these new vehicles. Neither of these trials will address the immediate needs of this district. What we propose is to take immediate action to address the climate emergency head-on, while also improving Winchester's appearance. We propose using £250,000 from a new homes bonus to fund the planting of trees across the district, to form part of a Queen's Green Canopy in honour of Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. I ask you to support the amendment.
Right, members, we were going to debate. Councillor Brooke, are you indicating you want to?
Oh, thank you. Just wondering if we go to questions or if we go straight to debate.
It's debate first, thank you.
No, sorry.
It's only debate.
Councillor Horrell has seconded and reserved her right.
Hey, Councillor Evans, please.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I can't possibly support this budget. And I'm just going to pick out some of it, but I can't, you know, the bits in there that are copied from the original budget, or some of them are just the sums adjusted up. It all adds up to quite a lazy budget, to my mind of thinking. So what should we do with number 5, A to H? Oh, we'll scrap all of it. And then we'll put it in a reserve, and then we'll think about, you know, whether we're going to spend that or not. And why? Planting trees, very important, but we already have planted a considerable number of trees across the district. And to pick out the ones that I really care about, because we can't talk about all of them, the taking out the heritage repairs to our heritage monuments and historic assets. What are we supposed to do then? Not just let them crumble away? I would really like Winchester to put itself forward as a city of culture, but if we're not going to look after our monuments and heritage, then we're never going to be able to do that. The City of Sanctuary, Councillor Godfrey mentioned that could be considered in the reserve, but this was something which I believe, I wasn't here at the last council because of ill health, but I believe that all members supported. So why would you be taking that out? And it was a unanimous vote, and so on. And then there's parking charges, to remove charges. Well, I don't know what research has been done on that, because certainly in the cities down in the southern part of the district and out, Portsmouth charge 24 hours. In Wickham, it's free on Sundays anyway. Chichester goes on to 8 o'clock. So people expect to pay for visiting a car park and expect the maintenance. So this all adds up to this sort of fascination that the administration have had about free Sundays. And yet people are coming into Winchester. Sundays is not a quiet day anymore. And they come and they use the litter bins and they use the toilets. So really there should be some sort of charge for that. And I just get the impression that the administration felt that they needed to present something. Oh no, sorry, I mean flashback there. Oh, a nightmare flashback. The opposition felt that they had to present a budget and, oh, well, we'll just do this. We'll just scrap most of it and put a few things in that look good. I just can't possibly support it, especially when what we have before us as a substantive is such a good, balanced budget. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Todd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the chance to comment on Councillor Godfrey's motion, or the chance to comment on this amendment. And if you forgive me, Councillor Godfrey, I'm going to comment on what's actually written in the motion rather than what's in your head, which is what you were talking about earlier. Because what you're being asked to vote on today is the set of words in front of you now. And I'm going to tell you what you're going to vote for if you vote for it, and what you will be taking out of the budget and what that actually means. So first of all, increased provision for local council tax support. It isn't in your motion, and if you pass the motion, the amendment, you will be cutting the money for council tax support.
Yeah, it's a 1 year.
Yes, you will. You've just taken the line out of the budget. 450,000 to fund essential maintenance work. When King Alfred needs protection, the Butternut Cross needs repair, there's so much that needs doing, and it's time to make a proper investment. It isn't in your motion, and if you pass it, you'll be cutting the budget for it. Low carbon transport. Ah, bless. Councillor Horrell thought that Salisbury got electric buses for free. Sadly, they required a 600,000 grant from central government and then spent another 600,000 on top. The costs of doing this, the cost of working out how to do it well, is not straightforward. There isn't space in the Stagecoach depot for all the buses and the charging infrastructure. We need to look at the charging arrangements in that whole area, as well as near the Biffa depot, as well as looking at the capital costs of the vehicles themselves. And none of that comes for free. None of it comes for free, and we wouldn't expect it to come for free. And that's why we put money in the budget for it. Bike storage, that's another one that I believe some Conservatives spoke in favour of, and that you've just taken out of the budget. Food waste trial. Well, first of all, the government isn't telling us how to do food waste. And there are lots of different executional details that need to be got right. And I was talking about recycling earlier today, because Hampshire County Council, run by the Conservatives, has declining recycling levels and has the worst recycling rate of any county council in the country. And it's declining. That's the Conservative record on recycling. And interestingly, it's pretty similar to their record here in Winchester, where at the end of their time running the council before we took over, they had a lower recycling rate than we did when we ran the council in 2010-11. And I'm very pleased to announce to you that if you look at the government's latest statistics of the top 20 increase in recycling rates in the entire country, independent government statistics, Winchester is listed for the first time in living memory. And you know, earlier today, I was actually arguing about recycling with Councillor Lumby. I was arguing that we needed serious action to improve our recycling rates. Councillor Lumby was arguing that we should allow an incinerator to be built near Alton.
You make political speeches. Who's actual one?
And the truth is, again, it is going to take careful work on the infrastructure, careful work on working through the costs to move ahead with ambition and pace to increase our recycling rates. We are not satisfied. One of the things I said earlier today in my deputation on the Alton incinerator was that even though the Lib Dem authorities of Hart, Eastleigh and Winchester are the top recycling authorities in Hampshire, even though Winchester is the fastest growing in Hampshire and one of the fastest growing in the country, we are still only average, and everybody beneath us is below average. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and it's urgent, and we can't wait for government to do it, and we make no apology at all for being ambitious on recycling. And it makes us something, frankly, wholly different to the Conservatives in their record and what they've actually been able to do. Now let's talk about city centre cleansing, which again, you're about to vote to take out of the budget. Well, firstly, a brief apology to the team for Bishop's Waltham. This was where the bin store that we've been talking about was going to be funded, but I hope you don't vote to take it out. That would be an awful shame. We'll probably find a way of trying to do it if we're in a position to anyway. But that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to get done, and it would be a shame if you voted against it. City of Sanctuary, again, read the motion in front of you. Councillor Godfrey has taken out the money and he's not replaced it.
Councillor Todd, your time is up, I'm afraid.
Oh, can I quickly talk about parking? Or no? Save it for later.
Save it for later. Sorry. Councillor Gemmell, please.
Well, you won't be surprised to hear that I am for the amendment. The most important for and I'm sure that you will find in the not too distant future that you have built up a complete tsunami of parish councillors who are appalled and horrified by the amount of unenforced planning contraventions that are carrying on in the areas. For myself, I can look at Dradfield Lane in Soberton. We can look at the illicit felling of trees in Hambledon, the Five Oaks and Raglington Farm, Shedfield Equestrian Centre. These sites are not new to anybody, but they are overwhelmingly running on with big problems that our parish councils are financing planning consultants to come in and try and make sure that none of it gets put through with retrospective planning through our useless planning pathways. It's become a laughing stock. We really do need some more attention here, and this will help. I welcome something that's going to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and putting the what argument can you have with that? It's using part of the windfall for something that's going to go on for the next 60 years, one hopes, instead of the ones that are being chopped down elsewhere. We have a 3.5 million asset reserve for the monuments and heritage buildings, not relying on windfalls to just come along and do the things to our monuments that we need to do. These things are ongoing, will be continuous. We must maintain them, and we have an asset reserve for that. We don't put these things together lightly. They are not just put together on the back of a fag packet, which seems to be implied by yourselves. They have gone through for a technical approval by a responsible Section 151 officer. So please don't think that there is not work going into it. We are giving you an alternative that can really go forward for our heritage. I'm going to leave it there because I know that there's others that want to speak on this one.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could I just have a point of order?
Could you turn your microphone off, please, Councillor Gemmell? Thank you.
I might have misheard. Did I hear Councillor Gemmell call enforcement officers half-wit? I didn't. I apologise then, Councillor. I definitely heard the term half-wit.
Yeah, I think you'll find it's pathetic, not half-wit.
Okay, apologise,
Useless, wasn't it?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, for interrupting.
Yeah, if councillors, if we could just be kind and respectful, please, and please don't interrupt when other people are speaking, because wearing two hearing aids, I still can't hear them for a start. Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Williams, please.
Okay. Earlier tonight, I alluded to the fact that the climate emergency is the key thing that we as a council have to do and is part of our core plan. The climate emergency is the biggest threat to humanity and the most important issue of our time. The Tories talk the talk and yet refuse to walk the walk. They talk about reducing emissions and improving air quality, but instead their budget does the opposite. They are so keen to remove parking charges on Sundays and in the evening that they would rather impose increased carbon emissions and reduced air quality. It should be noted that air quality doesn't suddenly improve just because it's the weekend or because it's expedient. They talk about how other towns have no parking charges in the evenings, yet Basingstoke, Eastleigh and Southampton have charges. They talk about the economy. Yeah, excuse me, I think. They talk about the economy and wanting to make it better, and yet the evidence is to the contrary. Towns across the world where they reduce cars in city centres actually have better economies, as people want to go to towns where they are actually welcome and cars are not the majority. So it is again against the climate emergency. They say they want to do it, but only when it's cheap and when it's easy. We will not fight this emergency, and instead we will fail our residents and future generations. Also, as a side, it should be noted that the reduction of car parking charges means that you will be cutting the fund to build the car park for the Dean, which is perhaps something that Councillor Isaacs would not be that happy about. The tree planting is lofty and seemingly worthwhile ideal, but the cost of planting trees is not in the planting, but in the maintenance. And the question would be, is that part of this budget? Also, it takes years for trees to become carbon neutral. They aren't just neutral the moment you put them in the ground. And if they are not looked after properly, they die. We have put forward an amazing tree strategy that looks at the present and the future of our trees and have surveyed over 6,000 trees, as it is key to maintaining our stock. The proposal for planting trees feels a little bit like it is headline grabbing and does not actually seek to solve the problem of climate emergency. Therefore, I will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Tibber Cooper, please.
So I've only been here 9 months, but I'm really confused by this amendment. So the £1.3 million new homes bonus is not being frittered away. It's being invested in vital schemes now, at a time when it is most needed. And Councillor Cutler's just given loads of details about how this budget surplus is already leading to us investing money in the reserves. So I'm so puzzled. Now, like Councillor Godfrey, I do agree with you that the items listed for investment do need regular investment, but then investment begets investment. There's surely this amendment that you've given gives zero detail as to how you would invest in these things, and it simply just wipes away £1.3 million of investment that we're putting into these things. And why would we, to use this painfully annoying phrase, dither and delay, investing in these things? So what this amendment seems to do is let down people who need this council hardship fund money now. It lets down people who want to see our cities and heritage sort of restored now. And I'm sorry, but frankly, when the Hyde 900 and the Friends of Hyde Gate hear about how you're going to cut the restoration money from Hyde Gate, they will be fuming. And no, I'm not going to turn. Right, hey, Hugh, Councillor Lumby, I didn't talk where you're talking, so don't talk while I'm. Oh, so shush.
Councillors, please.
So
thank you.
I'm not going to turn the City of Sanctuary into a political issue. I don't want to. But this amendment means I'll have to turn around to the people that I've already told and said this council is going to invest £25,000 almost immediately into this and say, actually, we're not going to anymore. We're going to put it into a reserve fund and then maybe something will happen later on. It's just dither and delay. So what we've got here is a Lib Dem budget that's going to invest £1.3 million right now on important schemes against an amended budget, which is going to put a lot of money in the reserves for goodness knows what. So obviously I reject this budget and this amendment to the budget, sorry. And I suspect actually a vast majority of residents in the district will be rejecting it too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke, please.
Thank you, and I'm going to address you correctly as Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the chance.
You've been told now it's to budget.
Sorry?
My nickname is Two Budget.
Two
'Cause I've got
budget.
one now and I've got one when I'm the mayor.
Mr Deputy Mayor, two budget. So, I firstly want to say, Councillor Todd thinks his patronising attitudes are good and okay in full council, and yet he said he'd stick solely to speak on the words in front of us in the amendment, and he couldn't even stick to his own target on that, and therefore ran out of time and couldn't make his important point at the end. I'll be supporting this amendment because I've heard this administration talking very many times about the future holes in the budget, and yet as soon as they get a windfall, they quickly try and spend every penny. The surveying of 6,000 trees, Councillor Williams references, was that before or after Storm Eunice? How much carbon was wasted driving around the district because if you can't consult with parishes on planning and the future of the local plan, I'm sure you didn't involve them in tree surveying either. If only this administration could make decisions as quickly on a day-to-day basis, on day-to-day business as they can on frittering away this windfall, then I think things would move forwards a lot faster. So I am willingly supporting this very sensible amendment.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Clementson, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm going to be sort of a wing and a prayer with this because I just come to these meetings on evenings like this and I wonder why, oh why, do we do this? As an independent, the only independent in this chamber, I can see the good and the bad in both the alternative budget and the budget that has been put forward by the administration, and a lot of work has gone into it, onto both of them. My first, and before I saw the alternative budget, my first big concern, which I was really disappointed at, was this administration had not included anything to recognise a most wonderful Queen in her platinum year. And whether or not, if I'm wrong, forgive me, I haven't seen it, but I am very disappointed by that. And as such, I would have spoken about it and asked you to reconsider that. Because whether you're a monarchist or not, this is a historic town. It's one of the most historic towns in the nation. And she has been a wonderful historic queen. How Winchester City Council can actually avoid doing something to recognise her and the wonderful service that she has given to this nation, I am bitterly disappointed. Consequently, when I see the alternative budget, I think they have at least recognised it and then put me into a quandary, because otherwise I'm thinking, well, why haven't the administration done so? So from that point of view, I like the alternative. I also like, in this uncertain time, that the alternative budget puts by money that does not need to be spent right at this moment when the times are so uncertain. There are many things being spent, and I would like to see them held back and reserved just to see where we go with the recovery of the pandemic. There is well-being and there is a lot of mental health issues. People are getting out and about and they are struggling with their own livelihoods at the moment, and people are struggling with their finances. So why can't we give them back something? Give them back some free parking. What difference will that make in the big picture? It will enable people to get out. It will help the household budget. It will help families to take their children out for walks and to places. And from that point of view, I really do support the alternative budget, although I have to say that there are a lot of good points on the budget that has been put forward by the administration. So I will be adopting this and supporting this alternative budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Power, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I will be brief. First of all, these newborn tree enthusiasts. We don't have much land. And certainly I've been approached by all the tree officers in Winchester and indeed in Hampshire saying, please, can you find me some land to plant some more trees? So that one's not going to go because we've done it already. The major investment reserve, presumably this is in the hope that the Conservatives will gain control at some point in the future and will be able to indulge more futile fantasy projects. That's not going to go well. And not dealing with historic monuments, that is silly. Early intervention is key to maintaining historic monuments. They've been neglected for far too long and they need to be looked after now. And then the car park reserve. Hampshire County Council are still intending to take back control of on-street parking and make money at it. I have to tell you that in Alresford, free on-street parking is essential to the local economy, and that makes it ever more important that our parking is as efficient as possible. I will not be supporting this amendment. I think it's ill-conceived and badly thought through. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think the opposition has probably got the clear message now that we won't be supporting this a bit of a hodgepodge of an amendment, frankly, to this budget. Only a few minutes ago, or an hour ago probably now, you were all saying you were supportive of our plans to support the City of Sanctuary, and yet in one fell swoop you just sort of deleted that. You also say that you're supportive of putting money into the Hardship Fund, but yet again this has also been taken out. And one of your speakers said we didn't put this together lightly. Well, I think it looks very light indeed, actually, very light on detail, and really not thought through at all, given your earlier comments in the main budget debate. I think we have to remember that when we took control of this council, we did so with a looming £19 million deficit left to us by the Conservatives. And since that time, we've not only had to address this deficit, but we've had to face an unprecedented and incredibly turbulent couple of years where our officers and staff have been stretched to the limit. And it is to their enormous credit and with our grateful thanks that they have helped us produce for the third year running the balanced budget that we have put before Council today. I haven't got a lot to say on this amendment because, frankly, I think other members on my side of the chamber have said all there is to say much more eloquently. But we've also had a number of comments about tree planting, and I would just like to remind members that we did plant a Jubilee tree at Stanmore School with under the green canopy. But we also applied for Green City funding, but that wasn't successful. And what we have agreed to do this year is that all trees planted will have a Jubilee plaque put at their base. So, and I think, and as Councillor Powers said, we are struggling to find land to plant trees. So don't worry, we are going to plant them where we can, and indeed the Jubilee will be marked in a number of ways. That is one of them that I've mentioned, but also that was the whole point around the cleaning up of our monuments and sprucing up our town centres. It was all about making that commitment to getting those town centres to look smarter, to therefore encourage more people to come in and use them and shop and help our economies, both in Winchester City itself and around the district. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, we will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Reid, please.
I'll put that on. How's that? There is not, or there may be one or two ward members here who are not affected by the planning elements that we're I have never known in all the time that I've been a city councillor how many enforcement cases have taken so long to do. It's true that the city have now employed a new team which are trying to make headway. I know when I was portfolio holder for the built environment for a short while, we had communication with our parish councils. We don't even have that these days, not to any real extent. It's only just of late that the enforcement lists have been republished to go to parish councils. So that is a good thing in itself. So items B, C and D, we've got to try and look at the pressure that over the last 3 years we've put on the planning department and even the housing department. It is a great deal of physical pressure and a great deal of mental pressure, to the degree that we now employ 4 mental health first aiders in the city, and that may well go up because of the problems that have been solved. Fly tipping has become a menace, absolute menace, and this last storm has not helped, because down the Southwark Road, and I don't know whether Councillor Cutler has seen it, there is a huge amount of roofing material which has just been dumped. So we've got to invest in our staff so they can do the job properly. And a comment was made earlier by the Lead Party that our budget that we put forward as an amendment is not good enough. Can I just remind members, and especially those who probably weren't here at the time, 3 years ago, as opposition, you walked out of the room. You didn't even know what the budget was. But even that meeting still took a long time. So I will support this alternative budget because it's looking after our staff. It's helping our staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Edwards, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Other councillors have forensically and successfully, I believe, run through the dreadful impacts of this amendment line by line. I just want to mention one. I see the amendment removes entirely the £450,000 funding for essential work to conserve our historic monuments. Now, I'm confused. I thought, as their name suggests, Conservatives were in favour of conserving things, really cared about our past. Recently, their party elsewhere has made a lot of noise about saving statues. Well, King Alfred, wherever he is, he needs saving from pollution, if not from woke activists. It seems to me that Winchester Conservatives don't seem to be able to do what it says on their tin. I cannot support this amendment.
Councillor Hall, did you want to as seconder?
No. I do, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Lumley.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, before I begin to second this motion, I just want to make a point this evening. I personally always try to behave in a reasonable, polite and respectful way, both to my fellow councillors and officers. And it's really undignified, I think, tonight that we've had the level of comment in the chamber. Whether it was a cabinet member who threw her paper across the table when the amendment was given to them and didn't even want to read it, or the councillor who used unpleasant language as a matter of course and thinks it's amusing. I'm sorry, it's not becoming of a chamber of this nature. And I hope, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you'll take that comment with the seriousness of which I raise that. It is not becoming of Winchester City Council to speak amongst ourselves in this way. But to the amendment.
Just before you go on to the amendment, I did actually ask the chamber to calm down, be respectful. Okay, thank you.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm just making the point as a leader of the opposition group that we all have a role to play here. Mr. Deputy Mayor, we believe that we've missed an opportunity with the general budget this evening, which is why we moved the amendment. And it's clear from the speeches given by the administration this evening that many do not understand their own budget and where the money is placed within that budget. There is indeed a heritage asset renovation pot, a reserve that's already available to do the work that needs to be done on the monuments. We're not saying it doesn't need to be done, it is available. And we have reserves to do the projects that we all, I think, agree how wonderful to support the additional council tax support over and above what is already budgeted, and indeed some of the other projects that have been mentioned this evening. They're not being disregarded. There is money available. However, as Councillor Cutler has already admitted this evening, some of these projects are not thought through. When Councillor Warwick asked about the use of consultants, he wasn't able to answer her because you haven't decided how these things will work. And in our view, 1.3 million coming from the government unexpectedly in New Homes Bonus and the projected over delivery of 1.3 million from your original forecast means that there is money to be had, but not to be frittered away. And some of that upside on pet projects is simply not justified. Again, Mr. Deputy Mayor, being laughed at, I don't think is appropriate behaviour. So why, oh why, are we spending that 400,000 on learning about things that we already know about? I know the administration doesn't accept that, and I'm sure that your Liberal Democrat colleagues in Eastleigh would be absolutely delighted to share with you their successful food waste processing that they've been doing successfully for many years. And we wanted to do something proactive for the climate agenda and spend that money honouring Her Majesty, as some members have already indicated this evening. And we know that that is possible in an area as substantial as ours. Our recommendation for reducing the Sunday and evening parking is all about supporting residents to come back into the city and support our businesses at a time when we need to show them we all want them to succeed. It supports employment and it supports our local economy. The current parking charges are penalising the poor motorists who live outside of the city, who don't have public transport options, especially in the evenings. And I'm sure that many of you would be using your cars equally if you did not have a public transport option. On the doorstep, residents tell us about their discontent with our planning enforcement and fly tipping resources, which is why we are recommending to add more staff to support the hard-working officers who currently have more to do than they have hours in the day. We also know that the lack of legal resources holds up planning and enforcement cases, which is again why we want to support additional resources and headcount in these areas. Our residents would be delighted if we were spending that new windfall money in such a positive way to support what they see is important. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I hear from the debate already that most people on the other side of the chamber will not be supporting this amendment. But I hope that it is considered by everyone as a meaningful way forward. There is an alternative route, and there is another way of doing things. And that is why we have brought that before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Russell Gordon-Smith, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I just wanted to make the point that item 5F, which is £185,000 to be spent on smartening up the market towns. I'm not sure what share of that would go to New Alresford, but even a fairly small amount of money would do a lot to tidy the place up. It's become increasingly shabby over the past few years. And the town council in Alresford, and I dare say the Chamber of Commerce, would agree that a small investment to tidy the place up is a very sound investment, and is not a case of frittering it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Sorry, Isaac. Okay.
So, apologies to everybody for not standing. I have a very bad back. Well, Alresford seems to be mentioned quite a lot tonight, which is nice for a change. Just a couple of things I'd like to sort of comment on. And it's no disrespect to Councillor Williams for mentioning Alresford. Thank you very much. And the Dean car park. You're absolutely right. I have very strong feelings on that. For those that are unaware, last time I mentioned Alresford at the last council meeting. And in fact, what I didn't get to ask at the time, unfortunately, was the fact that the car parking that was mentioned, in fact, Councillor Todd responded to say that there was, in fact, a mild scoping strategy for the car parking strategy that we've been waiting for 4.5 years and still haven't got. And that they had been a review of an automated parking system, which is in fact ticketed machines, which we fought off. So I think it's interesting that, and not surprising, that when the station car park review came up and the prices were increased and we'd got no Dean car park to combat, that we were left with a 3-year contract. And a year later, nearly a year, should I say, those charges haven't been applied and we've had to pay extra increases in rent and lease options on a 3-year contract. We're now a year down into it. That there is the threat that Hampshire may be taking that back, and I can see why that might be the case in this instance. We have been asking for a parking strategy. The excuse now is that Hampshire may be taking it over. I'm not sure what the excuse of not doing it for the last 3 years has been, but we seem to be parking that one by the side. In relation to Sunday parking charges, I don't think people realise if they live out of the town, it costs such a lot from Alresford to go into Winchester. That more and more people are not going to Winchester, they're going to alternative areas. That's not what we want. We want people to visit. Businesses, for instance, for servicing, for their business, for cleaning, if they come out of the area, they used to be able to park in Winchester for free for their staff to clean their offices and everything else like that, to service provision. It is now becoming increasingly difficult for that to happen because people are having to pay for parking and businesses are just not being able to get staff to supply that. It is an issue. And I'm sorry if people don't think it is, but from a business perspective, from the Chamber and the businesses, it is an issue as far as servicing. For holidaymakers, I'm sure if they're staying at hotels, it won't be. But on a day-to-day basis, the Sunday charges are a real issue in encouraging people to go. More importantly, the feedback from our area is that they are not going to Winchester on a Sunday where they used to. Now, that's not what we want. We can't obviously change your mind on this, but I would ask you to review it because it is an issue with people visiting the town and it's not necessarily what we want. We've managed to stay off any Sunday parking in Alresford because it's vital to our economy in the town. And that's really what the biggest thing I would ask you to consider is to learn from people around us about what is working well. And if there are other areas that are doing something that you want to do and they're doing it well, why are we not learning from the experience like we do in business. Why are we reinventing and wasting money that we don't need to when we can learn from those experiences? I don't see why we can't get a working party into those areas to evaluate it instead of spending money that we could be using elsewhere. And if people want to plant trees, then by all means contact me, because there's enough places in Oxford that have asked me for trees for a start. So Margaret, I'm quite happy to pass on some details. And that's all I've got to say for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lerney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Structural deficit. Those are really important words. So I'm really astonished that we've got a proposal here which actually expands the budget deficit going forward rather than looks to contract it. There are lots of talking about plans for the future, yet that one-off 100,000 for flexible agile working one-off in the budget will help us achieve the £200,000 a year income in the capital strategy from reducing out the needs for office space. Yes, we have deliberately earmarked the historics asset funding. We could just have put it into reserves and said, oh, we might spend it on that later. But we want to make a real commitment to those historic assets. We want to be able to tell Historic England when they come to us that we have the funding ready. All we need is for them to give permission. And believe me, getting them to give permission to do anything is really difficult. It also puts us in a position where we can say we've got the funding when we're looking for additional grant money. We can demonstrate that we have a commitment to moving forward with this. Councillor Godfrey talks about funding maintenance every year, and that is why we have the £250,000 per year going to the asset and property reserve money every year that will help us catch up with the backlog left by the previous administration. When we move on to the capital strategy, you'll be able to see that we do have ambitious but realistic plans going forward for managing our property and achieving those increases in income that we're being asked for. So actually, as far as I can see, virtually everything the Conservatives are asking for is here in this budget, but half of it they want to take out again. So it's baffling me, and I will be sticking by the original.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. Councillor Pearson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. It's almost like an annual event where in the United States, the word liberal becomes a swear word. In this chamber, it seems the word conservative is a swear word. Or at least that's the way it is used by a number of people actually in this chamber. It's sad, but at the same time rather amusing. It just shows different viewpoints, different countries. Now, what I see in this to support first the tree planting, one of the problems we've got, unfortunately, within this district is that we're losing more trees than we're actually planting. Just about every storm that comes through demolishes not just small trees, but mature trees. The last couple of storms, a classic example of Winchester, where there's some beautiful mature trees were blown over and therefore they're gone. A lot of our roads around the district were blocked by mature trees, gone. If I don't know the exact number, I know 600. We've got 600 we lost.
Friday, 600.
Yeah, I know there's something like 8 million trees, or between 6 and 8 million trees that we're in charge of within the district. And 600 sounds insignificant, but as Councillor Williams says, we don't do much carbon saving from immature trees. It's the mature trees that's with the large canopies that do the job that we want. So even a small input into the planting of more trees, to me, is welcome. The second thing, one of the issues that we found in the southern parishes is one of enforcement, not just in planning, but also in environmental health, i.e. fly tipping, but also licensing. The problem to me in that, and I've been saying this for 20 odd years, I've been on the council, there's no budget line for enforcement. The result is the office concerned are very, very reluctant to take a case to court unless they're pretty sure they're going to win. Fair comment, you can't throw money away, but that also means that a lot of cases that would otherwise be solved are not being solved. And look at the list of enforcement in the Central Main Valley Ward. A lot of on that list are simply, we are inspecting that situation. And that is the situation for 6, 7, 8 weeks. How long does it take to visit a site to come to a conclusion what the situation is? We have to do that sort of thing from time to time. Planning committee, we have site visiting. Now, in that case, of course, it's not something that is there. Sometimes it is, because it's a retrospective planning application. I won't go into detail about those, because generally most members of the planning committee are incandescent about some of these things that are going through for various reasons. The annual staffing budget, clearly that needs to be increased, has to be increased if we're going to add more people to the planning department and the legal team. So there has to be an increase. There will also be, of course, an increase in salary rates coming forward as a result of the pay awards, which I assume will come through as inspected. Car parking. We're talking here about car parks after 6 o'clock. Well, the parking fees stop after 7 o'clock presently, which is according to, that's £1.50 a car. Now, one of the reasons for having free car parking in evenings is to encourage the nighttime economy. I thought that was one of your flagship aims, to increase the nighttime economy in Winchester. Apparently not. At least that's the implication. And I'm sure you'll be quite indignant when you say that. Nighttime economy is a phrase, because I come from the Arc, rather confuses me. For my generation, nighttime economy means something quite different from what I understand younger people refer it to. But well, it's different generations, and this is the issue all the time, isn't it? Audit fees were inevitably they're going to go up. So these are the positive things that I see in this amendment, which I do not see in your amendment. And I've got to say I regret, and I harken this plenty of times, I've been teaching about climate change since the 1970s. So please don't give me a lecture about climate change. I probably taught some of you that, or at least you sat the examination that I wrote and designed, because I was an examiner for 20 years.
Councillor Pearson, yeah. I'm not going to give you a lecture about that, but your time is up, sir.
What? It is a debate, isn't it? Am I speaking too much?
Not too much.
What unusual.
That's your own member said that, not us.
Me speaking too much. Okay, I'll try and round it up. There's the reason why I'm looking for this, and I do not see this in your amendments. I mean, I won't go to go through in detail your budget, the things I don't like, but I'm looking at the positive things, because there are a lot of good positive things in your budget. Of course there are. It's a question of how you allocate the money. We look at these as priorities. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Clear, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I won't be long, I can assure you on that. I don't intend going through the amendment, as others have already covered the points that I would have raised. But Councillor Clementson, may I just come back to the Queen and the Jubilee and monies? There is a fund, there is the small grants fund, which is on the website in Winchester, and parish councils can apply, and all sorts of people, and we can help, and people are already doing that. We can help with all sorts of things for the lovely we hope, sunny long weekend when we can all get together and have street parties. So please, there is money there for that. I just felt that you should be aware of that. And also on the fly tipping side, yes, of course, fly tipping is a blight on the countryside. Yes, it is still going on, but I'm going to defend the officers and Winchester Council, because I personally know that we have won lots of prosecutions. We have been very successful, not as many as some would like, not as many as I would like, but we are out there and we are dealing with it. So please have patience, because it is happening. Oh, and by the way, I do not support this amendment. Thank you.
Right, members, I have 3 names left on my list and then I'm going to close the debate. Okay. Councillor Lumby, you're next. Oh, hang on, you want us to close now, don't you? So you don't want your question.
I'm very happy to have a few words. I might even propose we move to the vote at the end of it. What do we think of that? Or do we want to stay here all night? It is going to snow tomorrow, so you may want to get back if you live in the countryside. That's the sort of free green area outside this sort of styleless hellhole that is modern Winchester. Let me just say a very few things.
What's the language, please?
Which word did you object to?
Your
Stalinist.
No, your description of Winchester for a start.
Okay, I apologise. It is which bit? The Stalinist bit or the hellhole?
We're not a hellhole.
Okay,
thank you.
Excellent. But we are heading that way, and that is in large part due to the policies that are very anti the city. Councillor Williams has confirmed that tonight by her assiduous confirmation, finally heard it, that the administration are anti-car. She said the whole point of the car parking in the evening was to keep the cars out to get the emissions levels down. So it was all part of the great plan to save the planet, very laudable, but the price is keep the cars out. So we hear it now, the Lib Dems are anti-car. That will effectively do great damage to our business in the city. Thank goodness we don't have that elsewhere. And then we will decline towards those 2 words that I can't say. What is it? 3 words? I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to mention the trees, because we've heard a lot of worthy virtue signalling about the wonderful tree policy, the leader, Councillor Williams. Can I give you an example of that in action? We had an approach from the headmaster of the wonderful school in Whiteley, the new primary school, very good indeed. And he said, we got a tree project, we want to plant a little wood in the grounds. And we want to know where to source trees from. Can you help? So I emailed Councillor Warwick and Councillor Williams, the respective climate change bosses at Hampshire and Winchester. Councillor Warwick passed me on to Hampshire County Council's tree expert for schools, who went straight down there, has been a great deal of help. Councillor Williams didn't actually reply at all. So I gave you a great opportunity. I wasn't after glory. You could have had all that. 2 plant trees in a school in Whiteley, and no, not interested. Sorry. So that is sort of it in action. Let's talk about enforcement and fly tipping. We have a place in Whiteley, Councillor Firm will be aware of it, the Tynefield Caravan Park, where there has been appalling fly tipping. It's been there for about 5 weeks now, including an abandoned caravan. It's been reported, nothing's happened. I reported it through the app a little while ago, and no response. So I emailed the council and asked what's going on, and you know what? No reply at all. nothing. So, look, I was starting to think that we talk a good game, but actually it feels like the lights are on, but there's no one in. So, in conclusion, I will be supporting the amendment, which I will now like to propose we move to, and I will not be supporting the budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Lumby, can I check that you're on a motion that the question now be put?
Yes, please.
Okay. Councillor Lumby, that a question now be put needs to be seconded, and on seconding, it gives the mover of the original motion their right of reply before putting the amendment to the vote. Mr Deputy Mayor, we would need a seconder to that motion that the question now be put.
Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Todd. Right. Councillor Cutler, you have your right to reply?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Oh, I don't think I need to be that long.
Box on.
It's a curious amendment, this, because I remember back in 2020, Councillor Godfrey accusing me of salting money away. And we've put forward a budget where we define what we're going to spend the money on, whereas Councillor Godfrey's amendment takes all that out and says, we will spend it, but we're not actually going to agree it here. And then he adds in a few other things that reduce income. And I'm confused because all the additional things that have been added in terms of resource, we've already talked about. They are the ones that we haven't been absolutely definite about because we don't know exactly what we're going to spend on the enforcement cases, but I did raise that earlier. But the bottom line for me on this is if you look at the medium-term financial strategy proposed in this amendment, it adds £300,000 at least every year for the next 10 years. It's a move back towards those big deficits that the Conservatives are so keen on running, that we've worked so hard to reduce. And of course, in 4 years, that 1.3 million has been frittered away. So it's not particularly wise to say or to believe that with that amendment, this money will be spent. We put forward a budget that shows, yes, a structural deficit there. This amendment increases that structural deficit and doesn't promise to spend the money that we've got now. So I can't possibly support this amendment. It's ill thought through. And you know, so therefore I think all on our side will reject it.
Right, members, I'll now pass to Mrs. Kirkman, please.
Councillor Cutler, could you, thank you, Councillor Cutler. Members, this is the amendment that will be put to the chamber now. It will be done by recorded vote. Mr. Blakemore will call out your names and note each of your votes. So would you please indicate clearly if you are voting in favour, are against or are abstaining to the amendment that was tabled by Councillor Godfrey and seconded by Councillor Horrell. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bentote. Against. Councillor Bronk. Against. Councillor Brooke.
For.
Councillor Clear.
Against.
Councillor Clementson.
For.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Camoyson. Against. Councillor Krask. Against. Councillor Cunningham. For. Councillor Cutler.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
Again.
Councillor Evans. Councillor Fern.
Against.
Councillor Gemmell.
For.
Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Gordon Smith.
Against.
Councillor Green.
Against.
Councillor Horrell.
For.
Councillor Isaacs.
For.
Councillor Kern.
For.
Councillor Lamming.
Against.
Councillor Lerney.
Against.
Councillor Lumby.
For.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Pearson. Councillor Power.
Against.
Councillor Prince.
Against.
For.
For.
Against.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Tippett Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Todd.
Against.
Councillor Warwick.
For.
Councillor Weir.
Against.
Councillor Westwood.
Against.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
Thank you, members.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I can confirm the result of the recorded vote, 22 votes against, 15 for and 1 abstention. Therefore, the amendment is lost. Mr Mayor, we now return to the substantive item where we will allow Councillor Lerney to have her right of reply on the original referral of the Cabinet minute, and Councillor Cutler will have a further opportunity to sum up before that is put to a recorded vote. Members, I just remind you there will be 3 recorded votes as we take the 2 sets of recommendations and the setting of the council tax. Thank you.
Councillor Lerney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will keep it very brief. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mr Deputy Mayor. You can tell it's gone 11 o'clock. I think we're all getting a bit tired now, so I will keep it brief. The council tax that we're proposing here is at a lower level than most other districts in Hampshire. We're proposing an ambitious budget, but a sensible one. And I think it's really important that we remember that actually the amount we charge in the district will still be less than several of our parish councils are charging for the services they provide. So I think this is an excellent budget. We've given it a good chance to debate it, and I would commend it to the council. Thank you.
Councillor Cutler, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I think we've had a good debate here and raised and brought out all the detail of the points of this budget, rejected the alternative, the very limited alternative proposed here. And I don't feel that it's sensible at this time of night to go into a long spiel about how good it is. So I just ask that council support this very well balanced budget that provides definite expenditure to fulfil our council priorities.
Please can I remind council that a recorded vote is now required to be taken, and members, as a reminder, we are now voting on recommendations 4 through to 8 of the recommended minute of cabinet. Thank you.
Members, as is required by the regulation, please can I now put recommendations 4 through to 8 into the recommended minute to a recorded vote. Mr Blakemore will call out your names and note each vote. So will you please indicate clearly if you are voting in favour or against or abstaining? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bentote.
For.
Councillor Bronk.
For.
Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Clear.
For.
Councillor Clementson. Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Camoyson.
For.
Councillor Krask.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
Against.
Councillor Cutler.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Fern.
For.
Councillor Gemmell.
Against.
Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Gordon Smith.
For.
Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Horrell.
Against.
Councillor Isaacs.
Against.
Councillor Kern.
Against.
Councillor Lamming.
For.
Councillor Lerney.
For.
Councillor Lumbies left the meeting. Councillor Miller. Councillor Pearson. Councillor Power.
For.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Raffels left the meeting. Councillor Rutter.
For.
Councillor Scott. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Tippett Cooper.
For.
Councillor Todd.
For.
Councillor Warwick.
Against.
Councillor Weir.
For.
Councillor Westwood.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you, members.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I can confirm the outcome. There were 22 votes for, 12 against and 2 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you. I now put recommendation 9 through to 11 in the recommended minute to the recorded vote. As is required by the regulations, Mr Blakemore, will you again call out the names, call out the names and vote and note each vote.
All right.
Hang on, I'll give my teeth around in a minute. So will you please indicate clearly if you are voting in favour or against or abstaining? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bentote.
For.
Councillor Bronk. For. Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Clear.
For.
Councillor Clementson. Councillor Cook.
Against.
Councillor Camoyson.
For.
Councillor Krask.
For.
Councillor Cunningham.
Against.
Councillor Cutler.
For.
Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Evans.
For.
Councillor Fern.
For.
Councillor Gemmell.
Against.
Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Gordon Smith. For. Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Horrell.
Against.
Councillor Isaacs.
Against.
Against. Councillor Lamming.
For.
Councillor Lerney.
For.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Pearson. Councillor Power.
For.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Rutter.
For.
Councillor Scott. Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Tippett Cooper.
For.
Councillor Todd.
For.
Councillor Warwick.
Against.
Councillor Weir.
For.
Councillor Westwood.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you, members.
Councillor Cunningham, can you turn your mic off, please? Apologies, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Mr Deputy Mayor, the result, 22 votes for, 13 against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Yeah, that was carried in. Thank you. Right, thank you. I now put the council tax resolution for 2022-23 on pages 79 to 82 of your agenda pack to a recorded vote, as is required by regulation. Mr. Blake will again call out your name and note each vote. So will you please indicate clearly if you are voting for, against or abstaining? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bentote. For. Councillor Bronk. For. Councillor Brooke.
Against.
Councillor Clear.
For.
Councillor Clementson.
Against.
Councillor Cook.
For.
Councillor Cremoisen. For.
For. Against.
For. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Evans. For. Councillor Fern.
For.
Councillor Gemmell.
Against.
Councillor Godfrey.
Against.
Councillor Gordon Smith. For. Councillor Green.
For.
Councillor Horrell.
Against.
Councillor Isaacs.
Against.
Councillor Kern.
Against.
Councillor Lamming.
For.
Councillor Lerney.
For.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Pearson. Councillor Power.
For.
Councillor Prince.
For.
Councillor Reid.
Against.
Councillor Rutter.
For.
Councillor Scott. Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Tippett Cooper.
For.
Councillor Todd.
For.
Councillor Warwick.
Against.
Councillor Weir.
For.
Councillor Westwood.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you, members.
Mr Deputy Mayor, the votes cast for, 23 against, 11 and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you, members. That vote is carried. Thank you. Members, the next item of business this evening is agenda item 8. Consideration and determination of the recommended minute of Cabinet held on the 17th of February 2022. Mrs. Kirkman, would you please introduce?
Thank you. Agenda item 8 is the recommended minute of Cabinet of 17th of February 2022 regarding the Capital Investment Strategy 22 to 32. And this is set out on your agenda and also in the supplementary agenda pack, which includes the draft minute of the Cabinet meeting. The draft minute includes references to matters raised by the Scrutiny Committee. Report CAB 3332 refers, and this is included in your agenda pack on pages 87 to 122. The report's recommendations are for Council to agree the capital investment strategy, including the specifics as set out in the recommended minute and the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirkman. The draft minute of the Cabinet meeting was circulated with a supplementary agenda after the statutory deadline, and I've decided to accept this onto the agenda because of the urgent need for Council to refer to the draft minutes as part of the deliberation of the matter on the agenda which requires decisions at this evening's meeting. Councillor Cutler, would you move the recommendation in report CAB 3332 and the recommended minute of Cabinet, please?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The Capital Investment Strategy report sets out the Council's capital spending programme and the principles which underpin it in order to deliver the desired outcomes as set out in the Council plan. It details the overall programme for the next 10 years, how it is financed, the governance around it, the appetite for risk, and the impact on the council's medium-term financial strategy. Capital programme totals 417.3 million over the next 10 years, of which 60.7 million is from the general fund and 356.6 million for the housing revenue account. The Appendix A in the report provides the capital programme by project divided into approved for spend and subject to appraisal. Key changes to this programme are a reduction of £3 million in the funding for the housing company, and then we have additions of £2 million for the demolition of the River Park Leisure Centre, an increase of 2.4 million on disabled facilities grant. That's up to 12.3 million now, which reflects a higher grant from government. The King George V Pavilion, an increase of 0.9 million. The budget is increased to reflect the latest estimated costs. We then have 59 Colebrook Street of 350,000, an addition of 350,000 up to 550,000 for refurbishment. Similarly, for the Casson block, we have 700,000 for refurbishment, and for 159 High Street, £500,000 for refurbishment. Also included in the capital strategy is a further 1.2 million for necessary works on the city offices over the next 10 years. This includes a replacement boiler, which will be more efficient, and 100,000 for more solar PV, depending on the boiler solution, which we hope will be electric and will be far more efficient. The strategy sets out the approval processes and project management protocols. It also includes several prudential indicators as required by the CIPFA Prudential Code for Capital Finance, and also the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities Statutory Investment Guidance. The report has been considered again in detail by Scrutiny. A number of questions were responded to, but the committee did not ask for any specific issues to be considered by Cabinet. I therefore move the recommendations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I'd like to second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor, yeah, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor, the report which supports this recommendations in paragraph 11.7.2, referring to the asset management strategy, identifies that the council has a portfolio of property which has the potential to provide an increasing level of income for the council. And the value of the council's portfolio can be unlocked by undertaking prudent development in that paragraph. Could the portfolio holder tell me which of the projects on the approved or not yet approved list fall into the category of unlocking the value of the property portfolios that we have to deliver income for the council?
Councillor Godfrey, I just read out a list which included 59 Colebrook Street, Casson Block, and 159 High Street. These are all improvements on and refurbishment of our own property, which will bring in a further return to the council.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Looking at the programme, it doesn't appear that anything is going to happen to Station Approach for 10 years. You're going to spend a bit on still improvements, but you've got no projects, no assessments, no looking at it at all. Now, originally it was going to be delayed while COVID sorted itself out, but surely you're not expecting 10 years before you do anything on that site.
No, we're certainly not. But if I recall, the Station Approach development was going to be developed by a partner developer, and I think if one looks back in minutes, you'll find that the provision for Station Approach was removed from the capital programme by the previous administration.
All right, thank you. Councillor Horrell, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Can I ask the portfolio holder to explain why the cattle market is not even being reviewed within the 10-year capital strategy, when we know it could bring substantial benefits to the city in many various ways? Thank you.
Councillor Cutler.
I don't think it's a position of the capital strategy to put speculative reviews into the report. When proposals come forward for the cattle market, we will put the work into it, which will be work that will be paid for out of the revenue account rather than the capital account. There is no point in putting speculative figures into the capital programme. This is just such a common refrain every year on the capital strategy, as you ask us to put in a whole series of things that, you know, are just vague ideas. It's not our approach. When we've got something specific, it will go into that strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Cook, please.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. Could I ask the portfolio holder where we are then with this, with reference to the depot opposite next door to the Winchester Sports and Leisure Park? What plans have you got for that? Thank you.
We're in the process of arranging public consultation on the future of the bar and depot. It was the intention to sell the site for a capital receipt once plans had been devised, but you know, we'll await the result of the consultation first.
All right, thank you, members. I have no more names on my list, so we will go into debate, please. Councillor Curran.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Mayor. I just wondered if I could make a quick observation on tonight's proposals before us, as someone new to this chamber. A comment which certainly isn't pointing fingers, but making an observation by someone who came to this chamber to make a difference. I was a witness to this meeting last year as a member of the public, and yes, I did make it through to 2:30 AM, like all of you did last year. And tonight we've had members of the public in the room, we've got members of the public listening at home. People we're accountable to and people who this budget was going to affect on a daily basis. Enforcement, parking, the sanctuary, protecting our monuments, celebrating the Diamond Jubilee, this capital investment strategy which is before us right now are all incredibly important and vital. But tonight I have witnessed a chamber unable to understand or offer reason to a difference of opinion. Instead of looking at amendments and thoughts to find value in each, so that we can make this the best place we can for our citizens, the #1 place to live, work and socialise. Instead, we just disregard ideas. Some members have spoken with sarcasm, maybe trying to be funny. Some have talked down at members. People have laughed and people have looked away and failed to listen when being addressed, and sometimes not answered the point. But hey, maybe that's what politics is. Differing views might not align with your own, but they're representative of members of our diverse community that we serve. Democracy is about finding common ground, for us to be the difference and to make a difference. I was always taught to be considerate and respect people with a differing of opinion, because even a stop clock is right twice a day, as much as some of you may think we don't have anything to say. We are a snapshot of our communities, and if we can set an example to try and find common ground on this budget, and if we can't do that, how can we expect our communities to have faith in our decisions? To take inspiration from Thomas Jefferson in his inaugural address, yes, we may be Liberal Democrats, we may be Conservative, we may be independents, but we're all citizens of this great city, so we must do better.
Thank you very much. Is there any more debate? No? Oh, Councillor Power.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. This capital programme gives us our priorities for the coming years. It delivers benefits for our communities. It is prudent and deliverable and gives officers a clear work plan. There is no virtue in pursuing multiple theoretical income streams when we have a full workable plan before us. Of course, we should be prepared for eventualities, and this administration has demonstrated that it responds very well to those events. But to frit a resource on pipe dreams would be wrong. I will be supporting this capital programme. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I think I used these words the other day with Councillor Cutler. That was lacklustre and lacking ambition, and that's how I would describe the programme outside of the very important house building programme, some of the disabled facilities work and the IT enhancements. We are a wealthy council compared with others, and we have many assets in a time when budgets are stretched. Maximising our return from those assets that we own is a duty that we need to embrace. We have a duty to be self-sufficient and deliver the required services. I hear the Liberals tell us we should not have too many plates spinning. However, we do know that in this area, you need to be having more options before you being discussed to ensure that at least some come to fruition. I hear the capital programme needs to be realistic in terms of delivery on time and within budget. I couldn't agree with you more. But the approach seems to be not to put too many things of substance on the list just in case we can't deliver that. We've almost forgotten about assets we own and their potential. We've not utilised the work already completed by the council for projects. Councillor Cutler forgets that substantial work was done on Station Approach and the cattle market. It's in the drawer, it's in the cupboard, and it does provide us with opportunities, and we would be utilising that information. Many projects on the list are those we started more than 3 years ago, but there are limited new options. And interestingly, you've chosen not to use the Strategic Asset Purchase Scheme to support regeneration in the district. I know you're concerned about the rules, but regeneration is absolutely within the financial rules for that scheme. And we have plenty of those. You only have to look around the district to see where they might be. I know this evening that you will refute these points and actually that you do not think there is another way to manage the capital investment strategy. But there are alternatives, and we put them before you in a reasonable and measured way. And we hope that residents will understand that we have tried to put some of their desires forward to meet those other aspirations within the resources that we have. And I'm afraid tonight the capital strategy doesn't really go far enough. So I, for one, will not be voting for this recommendation this evening. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor Loney, would you like to?
Right, it's definitely getting late. Yeah, I think we understand where Councillor Horrell's coming from, but she seems to be coming from a place which is 3 years out of date. COVID and changes to working practices and retail have blown an awful lot of previous work that's been done out of the water. With regards to SAPs, agents know that we're in the market. They regularly bring opportunities to us. We have even put bids in on some of them. at a sensible level as recommended by our own property experts. We've generally been outbid on those. Now that may be because other organisations are more entrepreneurial, but that means they are taking much bigger risks than we are in a position to do as a council. The capital strategy does represent a financially prudent approach to maintaining, improving and increasing the council's assets. And councillors do need to recognise that spinning plates means that if you spin too many, some of them will fall down. Running too many projects at once does mean that they all take longer. We have to prioritise, and we have a capital programme that does this. We still have our 1,000 council homes over 10 years in the programme. We are progressing disabled facilities grants, and indeed we've increased our capacity recently to do that. We have fresh projects coming forward, which we're looking to achieve over the next few years. And we've also passed some key projects on to development partners, which mean that they are coming forward faster than they would otherwise have done. We've got new employment opportunities. Just look at the goods shed, another example of where we're utilising our existing assets. Now, this is on top of our investment in new facilities. We've got, in particular, the new pavilion at KGV, which will provide a fantastic home for women and girls football in the district, something that we'll all be able to be proud of, alongside the new leisure centre. We're investing in addressing the climate emergency, looking at increased number of solar panels and potentially other projects in a similar vein. This is an ambitious programme given the size of the council, and I think we should be proud of it and agree it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loney. Councillor Cutler, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I think Councillor Loney's summed up admirably, and I think we should move to the vote.
Right, thank you. Please, can I now put the recommended minute of Cabinet on page 6 of the agenda pack? Please, can I have a show of hands for those in favour?
Against.
Hmm?
All those against.
No. All those against, please. Any abstentions? One. Right, the vote is carried. Thank you. Members, the next item of business this evening is agenda item 9, consideration and determination of the recommended minutes of Cabinet held on the 17th of February 2022. Mrs Kirkman, would you please introduce?
Thank you. Agenda item 9 is the recommended minute of Cabinet of 17th of February 2022 regarding the Treasury Management Strategy 22-23, and this is set out on your agenda and also in the supplementary agenda pack, which includes the draft minute of the Cabinet meeting. The draft minute includes references to matters raised by the Scrutiny Committee. Report Cab 3333 refers, and this is included in your agenda pack on pages 129 to 158. The report's recommendations are for Council to agree the Treasury Management Strategy 22-23, including the specifics as set out in the recommended minute and the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Kirkman. The draft minute of the Cabinet meeting was circulated with a supplementary agenda after statutory deadline, and I have decided to accept this onto the agenda. because of the urgent need for council to refer to the draft minutes as part of its deliberation of the matter on the agenda, which requires decisions at this evening's meeting. Councillor Cutler, would you move the recommendation in report CAB 3333 and the recommended minute of Cabinet, please?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. It's a requirement of the SIPFA Treasury Management Code that all councils have to approve a Treasury Management Strategy, which we do annually. The strategy set out in this report has been produced with input from Hampshire County Council Investments and Borrowing Team, who manage the cash balances on our behalf and manage investment of surplus cash and sourcing of short-term borrowing. We also have had the assistance of Arling Close, the Council's Treasury Advisors. The strategy sets out the forecast borrowing need based on the capital investment strategy, the general fund and HRA budgets and the medium-term financial strategy. It sets out our borrowing strategy, it sets out our investment strategy, and it also sets out our Treasury management prudential indicators. Key changes to this report from last year is that investment limits have been amended to reflect the higher investment balances expected to be held primarily due to slippage in capital programme as a consequence of global transportation and supply issues. These can be seen at tables 5, 6 and 9. This will enable the Council to take advantage of higher yielding investments over longer periods. The report was considered by the Scrutiny Committee at its meeting on the 15th of February. A number of questions were responded to. The committee did not ask for any specific issues to be considered by Cabinet, so I move the recommendations.
Do I have a seconder?
I second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Questions, please?
No question.
No question. Debate? No debate. Councillor Weir, did you wish to speak?
Only it's a sort of wrap up, just to thank Councillor Cutler and his team for this report. I think we discussed it thoroughly at the Scrutiny Committee. It raised, as he mentioned, some interesting points, particularly around the restrictions on borrowing for speculative investment, which I think it's important that we all note and take with us. These are turbulent times. We are facing rising inflation rates, and I think this is a very responsible, forward-looking proposal to deal with these uncertainties. So I move and recommend the paper before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Councillor Cutler, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor, I think we're the paper is there as presented and should be moved.
Okay. Please can I now put the recommended minute of Cabinet on page 6 through to 7 of the agenda pack. Please can I see a show of hands? All those in favour?
That's carried, Mr. Deputy.
That's carried. Thank you very much. For, oh. Are there any members against? No. What's my page? Members, the next item of business this evening is agenda item 10. Changes to committee membership. Mrs. Kirkman.
Thank you. I have been notified of the following changes to membership of committees. For the Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Godfrey is to replace Councillor Lumbie as a full-time member of the committee, and Councillor Kern is to replace Councillor Godfrey as a deputy. For the Business and Housing Policy Committee, Councillor Horrell is to replace Councillor Lumbie as a full member of the committee, and Councillor Kern is to replace Councillor Horrell as a deputy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirkman. Agenda item 11. Yeah, agenda item 11 is questions from members of the council. All members have copies of the questions and answers which were circulated electronically prior to the meeting and also available on the council's website. A reminder that our protocol is that only the questionnaire is able to ask one supplementary question and should indicate accordingly. Members are reminded that our protocol rule allows a total time occupied by questions and the answers and the supplementary and shall not exceed 30 minutes. In order to maximise the opportunity for questions to be answered, can I ask that supplementary questions are succinct and to the point, please? Question 1. Oops, hang on. Question 1, Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I thank the portfolio holder for the response to some of my question. Since Barton Farm was permitted and building has started, residents have started moving in. And now we hear through this survey of hundreds of people in Barton Farm, Kings Barton, and the surrounding areas that they overwhelmingly reject the plan to divert traffic through the middle of Kings Barton and closing the Andover Road. Do you accept that those residents, those hundreds of residents in that part of Winchester, need to have their views taken into account? And if so, what are you going to actually do to minimise the impact on those residents? Or do you just want to tell the County Council about the survey, as you replied in the response?
Councillor Gordon-Smith. Put your mic on, please.
Yeah, you've seen the written reply, and there's this long-standing statement of common ground going back to 2011 between Carla Holmes and Hampshire County Council about the realignment of the road. And last week at Hampshire County Council, full council, the Councillor Russell Oppenheimer, the executive member for Highways Operations, confirmed that this is still the policy. As the Highways Authority, the Hampshire County Council is the body responsible for the highways design, and including the detailed design of the Harestock Road junction, which was approved by the Secretary of State back in 2012 to realign the road. Obviously, good. We're obviously aware of the residents' views, and I do read the Hampshire Chronicle. And I mean, we can encourage the County Council and the Highways County Council to agree a final design on that. But it's not, as you know, Winchester City Council's power to realign the highways when it's been agreed 10, 12 years ago. No, that's not correct, but we can try to approach Hampshire Highways about it. But I can't go and glue myself to the road in protest.
Thank you. Question number 2 is from Councillor Laming, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
You have a supplementary?
Yes, I'm just about coming to that. Thank you. I would just like to point out that we seem to be on target and working really well on the climate emergency and giving it everything that we should be doing. And I hope that everybody supports that particular stage. And thank you.
I agree.
Thank you.
Right. Question 3, Councillor Reid. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for his reply. Our biodiversity network of green corridors relies on preserving our gardens and green infrastructure. Therefore, how does Winchester City Council propose to protect and mitigate for the loss of trees and the impact of biodiversity loss where back gardens are developed turned into concrete, which were formerly gardens?
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Well, that's an interesting question. There's not very much control over back gardens. There can be control over front gardens, and it's quite possible to write into the local plan restrictions. This is rather more a detailed design for town design statements and things like that. I have spent the last 50 years working as a landscape architect precisely to increase biodiversity, and you know, I will raise this point with the planning officers and see what we can put into the local plan.
Right, thank you. Question 4 from Councillor Weir. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Weir?
I do, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you to the portfolio holder for his reply. Would he not agree with me that it's high time the Conservative government reversed its policy decision in 2015, which he refers to, which resulted in them abandoning the zero carbon homes target? And moreover, given the promises at COP26, the government should ensure that councils such as Winchester can require developers with outline planning permission for major house building schemes to implement zero carbon heating and energy systems from now on, rather than saddling new homeowners with obsolete gas heating and escalating bills when they could be financing tested, energy efficient, climate saving heating systems now. Will he write to the Planning Minister and convey this council's concern that current planning policy and building regulations are locking us into higher and higher domestic carbon emissions at a time when we should be straining every sinew to cut them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weir, for your question. Yes, at the moment we are restricted in the standards of housing we can push for environmental insulation and so on. But I'm very well aware of this. We have a situation in Alresford where a new development, the later phases will be obliged by, well, hopefully government legislation, which will then be in place in 3 years' time, to have ground source heating or air source heating, whereas the earlier ones won't. And quite how the householders will react when they realise that their neighbour's heating bill is half theirs. But I'm very prepared to write to the Secretary of State about that and keep on writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question 5 is from Councillor Warwick. Do you have a supplementary, please?
Please, yes. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Thank you to the portfolio holder for your written answer. I just wondered if you could share with us your deadline for the Partnership for South Hampshire numbers and for agreeing those numbers before our own local plan is derailed. Thank you.
The Partnership for South Hampshire is in the process of trying to develop a joint strategy that can be agreed by all the member authorities, but it's going to be difficult because at the moment we don't have the actual figures. New figures will come out next month. The process at the moment, we're in the position of arguing about the process and what will come out of that joint strategy, because there are some major issues about whether Push should be the organisation to allocate. We don't accept that. We don't accept the numbers that the consultants in their work at the moment are using, and so, as I say, it's in process at the moment, and discussions are ongoing as to the direction of the strategy. We will stay within push on that basis because it's easier potentially to have a statement of common ground that covers all the authorities rather than working with all of them individually. But one of the problems is not knowing what government numbers will be. It's a problem for us in the local plan, and it's a problem for the push discussions as well. And until we know those numbers, we'll know what the pressures are. So it's a difficult situation at the moment. Push are planning that the joint strategy will be agreed in October. I think that'll slip. That will probably be too late for our local plan, but hopefully we'll have some indication of where the figures sit far sooner than that.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. My next question is from question 7, Councillor Cunningham, please. Do you wish to ask something?
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Although the portfolio holder's lack of a clarification of the council's positions that I requested isn't there, I don't have a supplementary at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just remind members that you are supposed to be upstood when you're asking or addressing the chairman. Question 8 is from Councillor Westwood. Councillor Westwood, do you have a supplementary question, please?
I do, yes. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think the portfolio holder for his reply, having confirmed that this administration has no plans to build 53,000 new homes on greenfields across Winchester District, contrary to the inaccurate rumours being circulated both in print and on social media, could you therefore provide us with an outline of the site selection process to which Sheila sites may be selected?
Well, as you know, they are judged by a series of criteria, their accessibility, their sensitivity in to flooding, their environmental suitability, and so on. What we are planning to do, or what we are going to do, is to talk to local parishes about the sites that are available. I've had discussions in New Alresford about this with the planning consultant and with certain members of the planning team there. And we went through the, I think, 9 Sheila sites that are there. Some are quite unsuitable because they're on the floodplain. One is on a railway cutting, in a railway cutting, and then on an embankment, and has accessibility problems. 2 are quite a long way from the town centre, but have various other virtues. 2 are closer, well, one is closer to the town centre, but would open up problems with the town spreading on another side of our famous avenue. So this is, I'm trying to explain by an example the sort of criteria we are judging. We now have a rough estimate of the housing figures required, and roughly speaking, in the case of Alresford, I was able to say that will be in the order of 100 new houses required over the next 20 years. So with that bit of information, you can have quite useful discussions with parishes. I mean, if they're all very wary that if you come to them and say, which are your favourite sites, that they will become very worried that you're suddenly going to offload a lot onto them. So we're trying to involve them in the process. One comes up, we hope, with sensible choices and with a sort of proactive approach from them. I hope that's a sufficient reply for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I remind members, please, to try and keep their questions and answers to the point, please. It's taken an awful long time. We've got just under 15 minutes to go, and we've got another 10 questions yet. Okay, thank you. Right, the next question is question 9 from Councillor Pearson, please.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for the answer she gave. I'm rather glad I gave you the reference so you could look the information up. But I was concerned that you did not have that information immediately available. I'm a bit amused that you're considering 49 points as being good, as the top score was 97. Admittedly, the bottom score was 0. So we're about halfway within national districts. I know you're quoting Hampshire because that makes you sound better, but nationally you're not, I'm afraid. Now, the question basically that I want to add to this is based on the conclusions from that report about biodiversity and a comment made by one of the cabinet members. I forget who it was. I'm not sure whether Mr. Todd or Councillor Todd or Councillor Lurney, where all the levelling up money was going north. You have heard, I'm sure, recently that in actual fact biodiversity is part of levelling up, but we cannot apply that. Do you think it would be advisable that the local spaces team, the open spaces team, landscaping team, ecology team, which comes up very well in this report, works closer to the planning committee so we can produce more developments that actually do reflect an upgrade of biodiversity rather than having to wait until November of next year, of which I was advised we had to do last week. Would you think having those teams working close together would be helpful with the urge to increase biodiversity in the area, particularly in development sites?
I would thank you for your question, and also to note that within my reply from the original thing, we know that being 49th is not great, and actually we looked at the report as something that gave us the ability to actually improve. It was a really good way of showing us the things we'd done well and the things that we needed to learn from. Equally, it did only look at the plan and not actually the work that we'd done. So it's one of those things that's a snapshot that isn't necessarily 100% really, you know, as we are today. As to biodiversity, biodiversity is something that's really important, but I do want to work, and I would happily talk with my cabinet member about how we can talk and discuss things in planning, but it's something that needs to be carefully considered, and actually, you know, I wouldn't want to commit to actually moving anything forward when at the moment I wouldn't have the knowledge or the ability to understand the resources involved in saying that. So, you know, it's, you know, biodiversity is really important, and I do think it's a key part of planning and something we should do. And I would like to sit and have a discussion with my cabinet member, and I would actually like to include you in discussions, because I do appreciate that you have a lot of knowledge and have been doing this for probably a lot longer than I have. And actually, you know, I could learn from it. And you know that I would like to meet with you to discuss this. So I think if you could come forward, actually give me some, you know, we could have a chat about it. I think that would be really good.
Morning, I think.
What's that? What time?
10:30 tomorrow morning.
10:30 tomorrow morning. I will have to check my diary. I'm probably taking my daughter to physiotherapy. Is normally where I am.
Can we move on then, please? Yeah, thank you. Question 10 from Councillor Power. Do you have a supplementary, please?
I do, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Does the portfolio holder share my concern that this untargeted benefit will incur costs for all council taxpayers?
Well, thank you for that supplementary, because it is a real concern, and this has been a problem with this particular government, who make announcements that aren't thought through, and then the detail comes later and puts a huge burden. We've had this problem the whole way through the pandemic with grants. Announcements are made, expectations are raised, and then neither the money or the guidance as to how it's to be distributed arrives for another month. Over the course of the last couple of years, huge extra burdens have been put on council, and the revenue and benefits team have been run ragged for the last 2 years. And this is yet another example of poorly thought out processes. If it could have been applied as a discount to the original bills, it would have been relatively simple. But this whole process of having to verify, to get the details from every individual council taxpayer and repay them that 100 is just almost a step too far. Our teams have been, our revenue and benefits team have been absolutely magnificent for the last 2 years. They've been under huge pressure. I hope this isn't the sort of nail in their morale, because and there is no indication that we'll get any additional funding on that. That's one of our concerns. You know, we'll have the broader concern of the implementation of the Environment Bill and the complex changes to waste collection, where again we'd hope for some government funding, but if this government's record is anything to go on, we won't.
Right, thank you, Councillor Cutler. The next question is question 11 from Councillor Gemmell, please. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I do. And basically, whilst I thank the portfolio holder for his reply, and you may say that national guidance dictates retrospective planning permissions are treated the same. I don't think there's anybody in this county or in this country that, as a member of the public, which would treat them the same at all. It's reprehensible in the very least. Now, my question is, when did it become policy to cease sending out the LDC reports to the local councillors prior to passing?
Sorry, the LDC reports?
The lawful development certificates. It used to be sent out to the local councillors, and I know that I'm not the only one, because I've spoken to local councillors about whether they receive them, and they don't. When did it become policy to cease?
I can't give you an answer straight away, but I will look into it and come back to you.
Thank you. Question 12, Councillor Edwards, please. Do you wish to have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, please, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I welcome assurances from the Cabinet member that there will be further consultation and an intention for mixed uses at the redeveloped Bar End site. How might she see the site contributing towards the creation of a 15-minute city hub for South East Winchester in the context of the vision for Winchester?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Certainly, I think that we should be looking at this site to provide some of the facilities which currently don't exist in the area. In particular, we are looking at the convenience store, which is something that's very popular with local residents, and certainly will be testing whether that still is one of their top priorities. I think we'd be looking for any development that comes forward to be contributing to that, and also contributing to the permeability, which will help make the access to other facilities so much easier than it currently is. One of the essences of being a 15-minute city is that it's easy to walk from one place to another directly and not have to go in a big U as you do now coming out of Highcliffe and going to the new leisure centre.
Thank you. Question 13 is from Councillor Cook. Councillor Cook, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And yes, I do have a supplementary question. And it's basically regarding, and I thank the portfolio holder for the reply, but my supplementary question is the City of Winchester movement strategy. When will we see the results of the consultation, please? I know it only closed midnight on the 11th of February, but I'd like to know when we will see the results from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say before you answer that, Councillor Todd, we have 4.5 minutes left and I've got 6 questions to go. Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much indeed. I believe, and I will double check this, that the full response is likely to come back in the autumn, I think early autumn. But I can reassure you, coming back to that, there was this particular point you asked about the bus gates and how they related to M3 Junction 9. I have followed up with county officers. They share the opinion of city officers that there is no intention to be putting in extra measures that might cause trouble during the construction process of M3 Junction 9, not least because M3 Junction 9 is an important precursor to many of the changes that we want to make within the city. Effectively, the modelling shows that it significantly cuts traffic through the city centre once completed, and then that is a vital step to enable us to make many of the changes outlined in the movement strategy. There are other things we can be doing beforehand, and we will do them. We will also, as I believe that we will see the results of the consultation, which has had a large number of responses. As I said, I think it's coming for a September decision day at the county, and we will put in our own similar decision making process as far as the report is concerned.
Thank you very much. Question 14 is Councillor Bento. Councillor Bento, do you have a supplementary?
I do, yes. I thank the portfolio holder for the answer and all the facts and figures he gave us earlier. And my question is, building on the excellent results of the garden waste and recycling, what are our expectations for our food waste collection?
Oh.
I thought you'd like that.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, the first thing is to say that we do intend to keep driving our current collections harder and making them work better. We're interested in programs that enable us to do a better job in flats with the services that we currently offer. And so we are ambitious to keep driving recycling generally. In terms of food waste, we have put money in the budget. There is a lot of careful work to be done. So Eastleigh are doing it, but Eastleigh's profile is quite different in terms of the kind of addresses that they're reaching out to. Portsmouth are doing it, but they are very firmly not a rural collection authority at all. And Rushmore has just announced the change. Although in their case it's quite a complex change, and the main focus is about enabling them to go to alternate weekly collections. So some of the changes that they're making aren't changes that we can automatically reapply. But from my perspective, the reason we put it in the budget is that we're keen to move ahead on the fastest timing. And we have various options in terms of partners that we could look at and ways forward. It's a complex procurement potentially. And so actually doing the serious work to enable us to be firstly able to learn how to do it well, and then secondly to be able to expand it properly. Also being aware of the changing funding environment that we face means that it's not something that needs to be done carefully, deliberately and well. In theory, we should be waiting for all the extra funding that comes out of the extended producer responsibility in the government's new funding arrangements for waste. But as I always say with this government, and indeed I'd probably say with any government, you know, any plan that relies on central government writing big checks to Winchester City Council is not a plan. So we do need to be working out how we can do it on our own account efficiently and effectively. as well as understanding the wider, making sure that it works within the wider policy context that we face. But one of the things that is happening at the moment in Hampshire is food waste is starting to move out quite quickly, as a lot of authorities realise that it's worth doing, a way of improving recycling and a way of offering better service to the public.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor. That, I'm afraid, is it, gentlemen, ladies, councillors even. We've run out of time. Lost my page. Yeah. Right, thank you, members. That concludes the formal business of this evening.